On today's video, I'm discussing the causes of bloody diarrhea in dogs. And so my first question is from Jem, and she noticed that her dog had some diarrhea with blood that was first discovered in the morning, and she's just wondering what the causes are and kind of what the treatment is. So kind of start off with what the causes of diarrhea with blood in. Now, a simple colitis is most common, so that's an inflammation of the lower intestinal tract, so not up by the stomach but lower down, and that's the most common kind of cause of diarrhea with a little bit of blood. So that'll typically be kind of blood flecks rather than a stool that is completely blood. There may also, and there's very often also, some mucus present in that stool, and simple colitis also often causes straining. So it might be that your dog is straining and seems to want to go to the toilet, but actually very little is being produced, and that's a normal sign of colitis as well. But there are other causes of bloody diarrhea in dogs, and some of those include hemorrhagic gastroenteritis. Now, that is a condition that comes on very, very suddenly. More often than not, it comes on very suddenly. It's thought that it's due to maybe a clostridial infection, although that's not always the case. So that's a certain type of bacteria. But you've got stool, a diarrhea that is just incredibly bloody. So it almost looks like complete blood sometimes. And that can cause dogs to become unwell very, very quickly. They get very dehydrated, and they definitely need treatment at the hospital or the vet clinic for that. You can also get infections such as Parvo Virus, which is clearly a very serious infection and one of the main diseases that we vaccinate our dogs against. We can get bloody diarrhea due to parasites, so different types of parasite within the gut, so worms and that kind of thing. You can have an intestinal foreign body, so a dog who's eaten something and it's working its way down, causing irritation and ulceration of the lower intestines, or even getting obstructed. Now, by the time it gets down to the lower intestines and when we would expect to be seeing kind of blood, often it will pass because it's already got through the most narrow bits. If something is getting stuck higher up in the intestines, so in the small intestines or even in the stomach, if that's causing bleeding, then actually what will happen is we'll see kind of a dark tarry stool, because the blood that's being produced and leaking into the intestines is getting digested, and that causes a dark kind of black tarry stool. Other causes of bloody diarrhea, though, can be tumours of the colon, so they can be bleeding, and that tumours can also be interrupting the normal absorption and digestion of the food within the intestines. And then another thing that can sometimes cause what we think is maybe a bit of blood on the stool is actually a ruptured anal gland abscess. So the anal glands are two sacs that normally express either side of the anus. If they become infected and enlarged, then they can burst out through the skin, which can cause quite a bloody pussy discharge. And if that's coating the stool, then you might think that your dog has got bloody diarrhea, but actually they've got an anal gland abscess. So those are kind of the most common causes of diarrhea with blood in them in dogs. Really, what's the treatment then? Well, if we're dealing with a simple colitis, which is, like I said earlier, by far and away the most common thing, then, and if a dog is otherwise well, if they're eating, if they're drinking, if there's no vomiting, if they're bright and active, then really a bland diet and monitoring are really likely to be sufficient. I actually discussed in the last episode of the Dr. Alex Answers show all about the different feeding options for a dog with colitis, so definitely go back to that episode, the last one, and check out that answer there. But if your dog has bloody diarrhea, if they're unwell, if there's lots of blood within the stool, so not if it's just a kind of a little bit of a flecking, a small amount of blood, but if it's completely kind of covered in blood and there's blood throughout the stool, then it's definitely best to get checked out by your vet, just to check that there's no other treatment, be that antibiotics, be that intravenous fluids, be that other investigations, x-rays and that kind of thing that needs doing. So I hope that helps if you ever have a dog with bloody diarrhea.
You've been watching the Dr. Alex Answers video podcast. Remember to subscribe and head over to dralexanswers.com for any links, downloads, and get your question answered.